So my name is Lani, and I am an Agile transformation coach who specifically works with marketers and marketing. Just to give a little bit of my journey to Agile. So I do come from a marketing background, actually started journalism, moved into marketing, and I have worked at everything from, well, I'm in Austin, so I've worked at Dell. I've also worked at IBM, and then I've also worked at a startup. So have had a little bit of all the life, plus working in some consulting agencies. I currently work at Agile Sherpas. So when I was introduced to Agile in about 2015, it was right when IBM was going through their Agile transformation and was specifically bringing it into the marketing department. And when I first got introduced to it, I was like, well, this is what I was just doing at the startup I was at before it got acquired by IBM. So it totally makes sense to me. Yeah, let's do it. And I saw very quickly some of the benefits, such as I actually was meeting with my team. So IBM being a big company, there were lots of people. We weren't meeting consistently. So I was like, ooh, we can actually meet together, get to know each other, work through some of the complexity. And so I, again, very quickly, I was a content marketer, product marketer, brought it into my team, and we embraced it and quickly changed things, I will say. So the transformation was being led by a lot of folks who had a software background, really smart, really great folks. At the same time, some of the marketing considerations weren't really there from the beginning. And so when I started, again, getting a little control of it over it, I was like, this is not going to work. We're going to change this. And so I want to share some of this stuff from my experience of, again, being a practitioner within it and within the marketing team. And then I also, within IBM, moved to being a coach and coaching marketing teams and organizations as well. And then that's what I do now. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And what I'll say is I do have some specific slides that I'm going to go through. My intent for today is to give everybody an understanding of what is Agile to marketing, and what are some of those considerations in working with marketing and when you're trying to go through a transformation, or maybe you're even working in IT and you need to work with marketing teams and you want them to move to Agile. And you might be going, why are they not embracing it? I'm going to give you a little bit more information about why. And ultimately, we want to work all towards business agility and having everybody really embrace Agile. And marketing is one of those departments and one of those areas that's really, really well primed for that positioning. And so some of these tips that I'll be working in as well, I think can help to say how can we get marketing to be that partner as you're working on transformations in your roles as well. So I want to hear from you all first. So when I say the word marketing, tell me what comes to mind. You can speak out loud, say it in the chat. I can't see the chat. Lost my chat.
Well, two aspects come to mind. One is inbound marketing, which is like product ownership. Okay. And the other is outbound marketing, which is getting the message out there so people know about your products and services.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Reaching your current and potential customers and informing them about your product and your company.
Yep. So how do you reach those customers who might be interested, maybe don't know they're interested yet? How do you interact with them? Awesome.
This is cheating, but the single most misunderstood part of a business from the outside and underutilized because it is not understood from the outside.
That's your definition of marketing?
I mean, today.
We're just misunderstood.
Yeah.
It's not wrong, but.
Sounds like a voice crying in the wilderness.
Noah's one of my fellow marketers, so that's why he's, crying out for help.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing, and that is that as a technical development person, marketing is the most important function that I have to tell me what to build that's going to make our customers happy and it's going to make us revenue. So I love marketing people.
Awesome. Ned, thank you, because I will say we don't hear that often. That is not something, we hear a lot of the misunderstanding of what it is. And said through in the chat as well, yeah, generating leads, generating potential. So really, yeah, when we say marketing, it can be a lot of these things because it touches on a little bit of everything in terms of where in your customer life cycle you're working with. And it can be an email, it can be a social media post, it can be a campaign, paid media, events, analytics, advertising, communications. I'll go through more, but that's just the start of kind of the encompassing of marketing. And so when we look at where marketing has been, I wanted to give at least a brief, really brief understanding of history of marketing, and Noah could give you more later if you choose, set up a coffee chat with him. So there's the places where we started, which as we know, started some newsletter, billboards, as technology has evolved, moving into radio, into TV, and then just this plethora of explosion in the digital age. And one thing I'll say is that this chart, I love the visual of the explosion, but it's only through 2010. So can you imagine through now, 2022, where we now have Snapchat, we have TikTok, we have a lot of other mediums and social media that are encompassing everything that marketing touches. And so again, when we think about marketing, it is the promoting and selling of products and services, and it can include also market research and advertising. And so as kind of parallel, I think within the software to marketing, digital brought that explosion of potential and the opportunity to really think about how we can change. So one might think that marketing would embrace Agile in the same kind of speed and way that development has, but it hasn't. So I want to go into a couple reasons about why. So what are some of the challenges that are really keeping marketing from embracing Agile in the way that we might think? So as I go through my presentation, I'm also going to share some charts that just came from the State of Agile Marketing report that Agile Sherpas, along with Workfront and IBM, have released. This is the 5th year that it has come out. And it's just some of the data to kind of back some of the things that I've seen throughout my time in both marketing and coaching marketing, and see some of the trends that are coming out. And at the end of my report as well, I'll share a link if you all want to check it out. There's some really great insights and perhaps even some that you might want to share if there's other areas, whether it be marketing or other non-technical teams who are thinking about moving to Agile. So just to touch on some of the challenges, hopefully y'all have had a chance, if you're looking at this chart of challenges, what are some that are standing out to you? Hopefully you can see it big enough.
I mean, the first thing, the 5% that have no challenges sort of jumped out to me at first for some reason. Like, wow. But actually all of these look familiar to non-marketing teams as well. Like there's some similarities.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks. What about other folks? Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, plans changing too frequently. When I think of marketing, I think about a lot of planning. And so sometimes they don't want to talk to us until things are more together, or until product launch, or until some other thing. And that kind of extends the timeline to actually get the product to market. So that stands out to me. Okay, so
a challenge that you've seen within your organization about like some of that planning may take a little bit too long. And you're, by the way, Chase, kind of uncovering something I see common across marketers is we're really perfectionists. And so we've got to change that in the culture to really say, how do we do things differently?
Yeah, these all strike me as the result of anti-patterns. I mean, like, plans change too often. That's a positive thing. When the market changes, we do too. If you've got these problems, it's because you haven't organized to deal with. The Agile will help you deal with these things.
Well, it depends on that one, because
sure,
the pace of marketing versus the pace of development, I agree with you, change is very good. If marketing can't keep pace with software development, or software development can't keep pace with marketing, then it becomes a problem, because someone is chasing someone else versus being in unison in that way.
That's well stated.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Change is great. And even I think you see it with that 33% of difficult to manage unplanned work. A lot of the culture with marketing becomes fire drills of things that are generated from the business that marketing is then given to solve. And that becomes unplanned work kind of coming in.
Yeah. Thanks, Noah. We'll get into some of that. I just saw this chat, last shiny item syndrome. Yes. That is very common. I want to go back to your point that a lot of these are also faced by development teams. So what I want to go into now is what's some of those differences, though, that might make it a little bit different for a development team versus a marketing team. Because even some of the tips that I'll share later, they're very common to how we're going to coach with development or other non-technical teams. And I actually put marketing in kind of that bucket of not a non-technical team. And a lot of what I'll talk about can also apply to other areas, like, say, finance, HR. But there are certain considerations that at this level of complexity. And so in order to say how we're going to approach this, I really want to give these items for consideration about why marketing is different. I want to keep hitting too much. All right, so the first thing is I opened up with that chart of all the channels. So when you think about all the channels, you have to have the people who are going to be working on those, creating the strategy, managing. And so what's happened is that the roles that originally started off, Ned, you said inbound, outbound. It used to be that simple. We just had the inbound, we had the outbound. You could kind of categorize it. You knew what was going on. With that increase in channels, we now have a lot more specialization. So we have demand generation, which can include any way of acquiring a client. You have digital, which actually can include anything from social media to paid media to probably a lot more, even advertising within that. Then we also have some of the analytics that have come in, and you have the creation of the actual content. So the skills that are required go from the spectrum of really creative in terms of how to create content. You have designers, you have copywriters, to now the folks that need to analyze the content. And so we've had a boom of folks who are really analytics and even the technology stack to support that. So again, one of the things that when you think about one of the tenets of Agile and really being able to come together to perhaps swarm around a topic, there becomes this element of difficulty. So I'm working with a team right now, and they're having this discussion of how can we do more swarming around user stories? And how does that work if you have a product marketer who's working on messaging, and then you have the content people who are really focused on designing, and then you might have someone building a campaign. So there are opportunities to say, are there certain roles that may cross over a little bit more? I come from, again, especially working at a startup, you do a little bit more of that cross. I'm going to own a lot of stuff. But I would even do that a little bit when I was at IBM, was that I was doing content marketing, but I had to do some product marketing as well when we didn't have a product marketer. And so that had to be done because the messaging has to be done in order to create that content. So again, there's this complexity, this history of moving towards specialization. And now for Agile, there's this need to have everybody, no matter what role they're in, understand the context for all the roles that they're going to be working with. And you can see that that's going to be a big feat. There's got to be the education time that's set aside. There's got to be that need to want to be that T-shaped marketer, to really have those deep expertise in your area, but also have that cross understanding. So one of the other challenges is really that variability of work and timing as well. So again, if we talk about the different roles, and then we talk about some of the timelines of what it takes to complete things, an industry event is going to take a year. There's kind of some of those things that's just how long it's going to take. If you're doing something like AWS reInvent, if you're doing a big like Microsoft World, a lot of those events just take so much time and so much coordination. But if you're doing social media and you're working in that respect, you might be able to get a post out in a couple days. And so we see a lot just because of the type of content that marketing is focusing on and putting out. There's just so much variability around the time it takes. And then you add on those new requests. So if I'm working on some messaging that I've got to get out and get ready for folks in 3 months, I'm going to start breaking that down and start working on it. But if all of a sudden I have a request come in that I need to put something together for sales, all of a sudden I'm playing this game of, okay, what do I choose to do? Because I need to, if I miss my deadlines for my messaging, that messes up everybody else who needs to create content, who needs to create the website. But if I don't fulfill this other request for sales, that may get in the way of us being able to have a good quarter. So there's a lot of those trade-offs that need to happen. And by the way, prioritization is probably one of the top things that marketers struggle with. And this is only one of the reasons. I'll get to something else. And also, if you all have questions or comments as I go through, feel free to raise your hand or jump in. The other complexity that we have is around a multitude of stakeholders. So I've shown here a couple variations because again, marketing, because of all those different roles, the way that we're often organized is really dependent on the goal or what my focus is. And so we have more of probably the traditional, I would say, marketing structure that people are familiar with. So Chase, you might be familiar with this. You have marketing teams that you're kind of assigned to who may be helping you to launch a product. But guess what? Most likely, they are not assigned to just one product. They have usually a suite of products. They have a business unit often as well that they might align to, multiple solutions. So when I was working at IBM, we were the General Technology Services marketing team. And we probably had about 75 different solutions. We had about tens of general managers and product managers who we had to work with and who were often coming to us with their request. And so again, all of a sudden back to that, how do we balance, who do we go after first, can be something that's a real hindrance within this. The other structure that you may not be as familiar with, this is more definitely on the marketing side, is you might have marketing teams that actually serve marketing teams. And so these are often creative services teams. They might be shared services teams. So that might be a designer, someone who's doing the website, sometimes even social media and paid media. And so that's because the amount of work and what they're covering, it doesn't make sense for them to be assigned to one team. So they probably have multiple teams that they're working with. But they also face the same challenges of figuring out, how do I prioritize all these requests that are coming in. So back to some of the kind of culture things and behavior things that we started calling out even already. Marketing has felt, and I've seen this probably, I don't know that there might be one marketing team I've worked with that didn't feel this way, but marketing has often felt like the order takers. So they felt like the ones who are just getting handed requests and they just have to do it. And so we see a lot of overworking, a lot of burdening, because they're like, well, I just have to get it done. And even to that point of variability, as I go back to this slide, they're like, well, I just have to get past this hump because we have this huge event coming up. And then once we're past that hump, I can move on and it'll be clear sailing. And so we get a lot of that, of just like, there's this continuous cycle that they're stuck in because of all the stakeholders and all the conflicting priorities that come in. And then we also talk about who they need to work with to get things done. And so there's a lot of dependencies that they have to work with if they're working on a project. And so this is just a sample of perhaps some of the folks that they'll bring in. Obviously product, we have whoever's going to be the SME, whether it be on the delivery side, perhaps customers, finance, analysts, procurement, legal, and even outside agencies. So one team of marketers still has all these other folks in their network who they need to come in and work with. And it's not all the time. They might have some folks that, hey, if we're working on a launch specifically, I need to work with legal to make sure that the branding is up to date. Or it might be, we need to go through procurement for our event items. And so who they work with moves in and out depending on the project, but there's still a lot of dependencies that come in. The other thing I'll call out is even more so is the agency piece, because there's often a lot of outside agencies that are used. And we used, even at the startup where I had a marketing team of, I think there were 3 of us who were full-time. We had a couple agencies we worked with, we had a couple contractors, all the way up to when I worked at IBM, we had a couple agencies we worked with. It's a very common practice. Back to my previous note about the specialization of skills, to have all the marketing skills that you need in-house is extremely rare. In fact, I haven't come across anybody that does. So again, you have a lot of folks who are working different dependencies, working in different ways. If you're working with an agency, they may have different ways they're trying to work, or they are working, or what they can do. So that's something that I'm gonna have to consider. One thing I haven't called out yet is also for large enterprises who are perhaps more global companies. They even have marketing teams that work with marketing teams. So when I was at IBM, I was part of a global product team. And I also had, as partly my stakeholders, partly my partners in creation, I had the folks that worked in the regions and who worked in the countries. So I had to make sure that I was working with the product folks, working with the customer, also working with those marketing teams so that they could personalize what I was putting out at more that product and solution level. So again, some of these things can get really complex when you start mapping an organization and who they need to work with and how. Again, even from a small startup all the way up to the large enterprises. All right, I'm gonna pause here. Any questions on the pieces I've covered in terms of some of the kind of considerations, challenges of why marketing is a little bit different? Anything or any of those things that you all have seen when you've worked with marketing? Some head shake, yes. Come on.
Yeah, no, I used to work at Dell, and that was one of the things of everything would come to the marketing teams, regardless of what channel or what product would be coming and the prioritization behind that. So I'd be curious to see, yeah, how you overcame that, or if you have some suggestions for us on that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think I'm imagining just an insane amount of work in progress, especially considering the timings. Just seems like there's a lot of things in motion at one time.
Yeah, great point, Chase. Back to this kind of chart of the variability, I was going to draw a line that you have also those kind of business as usual things, or things that you always have in progress that are kind of moving towards, like I said, if you have an event that you know is coming up, or even a webinar that you know is coming up, you've got to do a lot of steps before that to make sure that it can go through. So there are a lot of kind of balancing the different timelines as well as different expectations from folks. Thanks for those comments. So I want to talk a little bit more about, so what can be done? What can be done in terms of thinking about this from an Agile perspective, and then just even from a transformation perspective. And as I go through here, again, I'm going to share more charts from the State of Agile Marketing that I think they do really well at setting the stage, but also I'll call out a couple tips and examples of things that I've done. And also happy to hear, because I've got a couple of my fellow Agile marketing coaches on the line, if they have anything to add as well. All right, my number one, be flexible. So this is probably one of the biggest blocks that I've seen with marketing, is that often a coach or transformation individuals will come in and they're like, we're doing Scrum. All right, we're going to do Scrum. This is how we're going to do it. Marketing, go. And it just doesn't work to everything that we've already called out. How are we supposed to decide and break down our work into sprints when we already know this thing is going to take, X amount of weeks? Well, who am I supposed to include on my stand-up? Who am I supposed to include in my script reviews? How am I supposed to do this? There's just so many questions that off the cuff start up, and challenges that come up when all of a sudden we're sticking to one framework. And so what we've seen predominantly happen within marketing is really a hybrid framework. And so again, from the report, around 61% work in some sort of hybrid or Scrum-Bon feature. So this doesn't mean that we're leaving behind all the framework and learnings that we have. What it means is that we're coming to it with get the understanding of what kind of work are they doing. Is the work they're doing really more flow-based? So then we need to move to Kanban. Is their work more digital? So if it's flow, I think, for example, emails have kind of a constant flow, when they're going. Sometimes that works really well for Kanban. Social media as well, because you're putting out posts all the time. But if you're doing something that may be more like putting out websites and pages, or even if you need help in figuring out launches, some of that stuff might help more and lean more towards a sprint way of working. But in truth, no really firm framework works purely as is. And I know that even in development, sometimes people will say, well, the framework, you always need to adjust it. What I'll say is for marketing, you have to adjust it more. There's even more adjustment than just, I'm going to use this as is. So that's one of the biggest kind of changes that I've seen, is thinking about how do we do this in a way that is going to work for marketing, and really partnering with them to figure out what's working and what's not. Any kind of insights from any other folks, and maybe how they've seen, or maybe you've tried to come in and share some of your Agile ways and it didn't quite work?
Well, being dogmatic has certainly never helped me. Sorry, Sydney, go.
No, that's okay. I was thinking about, and maybe actually, it might be too early. I don't know if there's something later about in the study about like mindset, because I don't know. I think methodologies, frameworks can be a useful place to start, but it should really be about the principle that we're trying to live. So I'm just curious if there are different principles in the Agile manifesto that work better for marketing, or if they all apply or just have to be slightly adapted. Anyway, that's just something I was thinking about.
Preach.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so my next one, start with mindset. And I intentionally did not put this one first because I felt like for us coming in as perhaps an Agile coach, Agile transformation professional, we need to come in with the understanding that there's a need for that flexibility and there's a need for that co-creation versus I think sometimes, again, when we see a lot of transformation rollouts where they're like, no, this is everything, this is what we're going to do. So I think either way, we need to start with that flexibility. But when we do talk about what actually works within marketing, starting with mindset is exactly right. So this is just an example of one of the questions that really shows that marketers, like we've talked about, have a lot of priorities. So the ability to actually push back and say, that's not what I'm working on, or we need to hold that off till the next sprint, or this actually isn't towards my goal. Can you go talk it over with the rest of the stakeholders and really discuss around that prioritization? This is huge and very difficult to get to, very difficult. Sid, to your comment, I have to find, and I was going to include the Agile Marketing Manifesto here, but I didn't. It was just redone this year. So I'll have to find it and I'll share it. But it is different. And there have been some updates this year, but there are, I can't recall them all, truthfully, but it's different. So again, and attending some of the coaching and leadership SIGs, we talk about this a lot in terms of how we've seen, especially with the transformations change, just mindset being such a place to start and to really kind of move towards. All right, one of the other things that is a start. So just like if you're doing development, you're probably going to pilot. Also, when we talk about Agile marketing transformations, we want to do the same thing in terms of pilot. The kind of difference is to think about who do we want to pilot with first. So if I were to give you this chart, tell me what team or what area would you start a pilot with?
Oh, that's a hard. Is this a trick question?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I was going to say, wouldn't you want to do work that has a shorter turnaround?
well, yeah.
Yeah, because like social media is pretty quick.
Exactly. So you can see results quickly and adjust quickly.
Well, and I was thinking more like, well, I would want to group it around a problem, and there will be somebody from social media, somebody from events, somebody from website, somebody from creative service, like more cross-functional is the way I would approach it if they'd let me.
If I had to pick one, I'd pick creative services because it's the most like software development.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, good call.
Ned.
Yeah. I same Ned am usually around those lines of let's pick someone who's the closest to what they're doing is already pretty easily fits in, which by the way, sometimes social media is, sometimes it's not. Website, same thing, but creative services, it kind of depends. It's not a trick question, but it's also not a clear start here question because it does depend on the organization. But when I'm thinking about just piloting in areas of like least resistance, again, I do think those who are more aligned to say the digital space are the ones who are most likely to embrace a lot of this because again, they're already working in a more kind of constant way. They've got to make more adjustments. Where I've seen more challenges, definitely on the what is more the product marketing side. So they're the ones who are doing the research, creating messaging. I've seen more of the challenges on that side because some of that just takes so long, and the client may not see it for 3 to 6 months. And so it kind of goes back to thinking a little bit more about what's the value to that area, because then it might not be that we necessarily get something out faster, which is often where people focus Agile, which we all know is not the best way to focus it, but that's often where people think. But for product marketing, you know, that value is probably more so, how can I release something that's a little bit more effective? So same thing when I was working in product marketing, we took it to be, how can we be more collaborative internally, externally with analysts, do more testing. So even though our customers weren't going to see it for 6 months, by the time we had something, it was more message tested. We involved the geographies as well. So we knew that it was going to work and they could customize it. I'm just checking in the chat, seeing what else folks are saying.
Well,
I sure like Sid's suggestion though. If I had a team, if I had an organization where there was some frustration about messaging being consistent, that'd be a great place to put a cross-functional team together. Mm-hmm. to integrate the outbound marketing, to integrate the creative, the social media, the website, all the outreach stuff. Getting those people cross-functionally in a room might be a real shot in the arm for the organization.
Yep, and that's definitely a tactic or way that I've seen some organizations do that. So work from, hey, we have a specific initiative we want to test out. Worked with a company who they were specifically, or their area of marketing was email. And they were taking a pilot team, separating them from the business as usual, pulling together the folks who touched every stage of the email. So again, it was still a cross-functional team because you had the strategist, you had the copywriter, you had the person who was putting it into the platform, and then the analytics. So folks at every stage that could come together and work. So being cross-functional, when you can do that, it can be really powerful. Awesome. So one of the other things that I've seen a lot is figuring out how to integrate leadership in this. And I know this has come up a lot in the leadership SIG and even the coaching SIG. We do have a tendency with some of the transformations to focus a lot on teams and say, okay, we're going to bring in Agile coaches for our teams, and we're going to train our teams. And then there's that block because our leadership has also not been trained. So they haven't been able to really see and understand, like, what is the value? What's kind of going to come out of this Agile thing? And what do I need to do to support that? So this is something, again, very similar to, like I said, development, transformations, but I want to call it out because one of the things that everything that I described in terms of the challenges that happen to teams of having too many stakeholders, having to work with a lot of folks, the marketing leaders are in the same boat. So I was working with a lot of marketing leaders at IBM, and they also had challenges. They were like, I can't go tell my general manager no. Like, there's just no way. We have to do this. It has to be done. And so if you think about that's happening at that marketing leadership, CMO, VP level, then those teams, they almost don't have a lot of, hope, I guess, that things are going to change. They're kind of stuck in a hard place. And so the more that we can look at those leaders, actually help them to figure out, hey, how can we adjust this? How can we change things to move? I'm going to quickly jump to my next one because I feel like these are very much together, is like when you can get your leadership on board, you can also start to change some of the other processes, the toolings, the system that marketers are working in. And so that's going to make it easier. As we were talking about before, some of those timeline things, some of that timing is a lot of waiting. We had, and again, this is big company versus kind of small company, and I work in a smaller company again now, which is nice. But if you're working at a big company, you may take a good month to have something go through procurement. And so if I'm signing up to work with an analyst who I need to create this really awesome piece of content, I've got to wait a month for procurement to approve so that I can even start the work. Or the example here being around budgeting. Budgeting has traditionally been done on a yearly basis. And so, hey, here's your budget for the year. If something changes in the market in Q2 and I don't have the budget, what do I do? So traditional marketing budgeting hasn't been able to flex and flow really with the Agile process. And so the ability to even move from an annual to quarterly budgeting or be able to have those discussions and have trade-offs just traditionally has not been there. The other thing is definitely even from kind of, again, a tooling perspective is thinking about, do marketers even have the systems that they need to support? And that goes even to the measurement. So if we talked about having clear objectives and goals, often marketing has had the challenge of how do we measure success? How do I actually know? And a lot of marketing teams are moving to revenue being a metric of success. Most marketing teams aren't able to say from the very beginning, someone lands my website, that all the way through revenue, yes, that contributed. And so there's a lot that needs to be done to really have those data and analytics in place in order to really say that we're going to get there. There are things that can happen now in terms of just thinking about, hey, is there kind of a proxy metric that we can talk about? I love talking leading and lagging metrics. Are there certain things that we can start measuring in behavior, even if we can't 100% say that we're going to get there? Can we at least start somewhere? And again, that's very difficult for a lot of marketers because, like I mentioned earlier, they're perfectionists, they're order takers. They feel like if they don't have exactly what has been asked, and if they aren't showing progress, then their job's at risk. And so that's a common thing that I see is a lot of that fear around that culture, which again kind of references that mindset and that leadership. I'd love to ask if for especially this one, well, leadership, process, tooling, kind of all of those. Are there any specific examples that you all have seen about perhaps things that have worked in organizations, or maybe where you've seen teams hindered because of it?
More hindered by it. Like there's a tool that the team would operate by and the organization has adopted, but yeah, it doesn't work well for the marketing team, and it's one of those things that the organization's made a decision, but departmentally it doesn't work for them.
So was that a transformation?
Yeah, it's a transformation. Yeah, we were trying to use a CMS, and that CMS operationally it worked fine. It was the technology that the team wanted to adopt. It was something that worked well on a technical front, but for the serving the needs of the marketers, it did not.
I thought you were going to say Jira.
No, Jira's the easy go-to. No.
Well, it's funny because to that point, we had instances where there were teams that were like adjacent to technical teams. And it's like, oh, well, they're using Jira. This marketing team should use Jira. And you've never seen so many people in a room, adults, cry openly.
I still don't know all of Jira. Total truth. I'm not a tools person, or I'm a keep it simple tools person. But Kamal, I love your point there around sometimes these transformation decisions get made and the non-technical teams don't have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. And how sad is that? Because you're
that is really sad, yeah.
you're trying to change a whole organization, and yet you haven't brought in the people who could really help to do that. And again, a lot of this stuff is relevant for marketing, but also for other non-technical teams. So I would want to work with like finance, procurement, HR. Like I would want to have somebody there who understands that space to say, hey, what can we change? What are those standards? So when I was talking about like flexibility, we still need some core things of what are going to be the standard that everyone will do. But then there's got to be that point where then from there, it's really flexible for the organizations and teams to make their own decisions. But a lot of that usually doesn't get discussed. It's just kind of like, we're going to roll out a transformation, or we think this will work. The other thing, and I was thinking about it more under leadership, but it kind of falls in between leadership and process and change, is also organization design. So as we've kind of referenced already, talking about the different ways that you can organize and look at your marketing teams. And again, sometimes I'm going to have all my creative services folks together because that's more effective. Or I'm going to have these cross-functional teams that are going to be focused on very specific initiatives or elements of the portfolio. I'm going to have my organization organized by the stages of the buying cycle. Or maybe it's by my different customer segments. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked in order to then say, how am I going to organize my organization? How am I going to organize my marketing? And again, a lot of that's why I'm like, hey, leadership, let's get you in here soon. Because unfortunately, even, I guess I can say this, I'm not going to name any names, but we do have a client right now at Agile Sherpas who they came in asking for team coaching. And they were like, we want to get our team going. Come to find out, it's one area of marketing, it was operations. And they are working with another area and kind of serving the other marketing / sales area. So already from the get-go, there's not buy-in from over here from the other people who are going to be elements of the team. And then you already have from the beginning, then the leadership not knowing what's the best organizational structure for those teams to work effectively. So again, a lot of these, when we're first starting out with marketing, the more that you can get in that leadership level, the sooner that these organization impediments, gaps can be raised and can be worked on and solved. All right, so these were just kind of my, again, final synopsis of my tips. Be flexible, pilot in least areas of resistance, start with mindset, integrate leadership, and explore process and tooling changes. The biggest thing that I would say that I would encompass everything in is obviously culture and behavior. So all of these things are elements of that and are going to build towards what is that culture. So throughout, I've referenced some of the behaviors that we often see within marketing around being perfectionists, around lack of prioritization, around really showing. So there's a lot of focus on output versus outcome because they know what they're going to be measured on, or they feel they know. And if they feel if they don't show it, they're going to lose their job. So there's a lot of those kind of culture fears that have kind of permeated through the marketing department that has to be solved alongside solving some of the more kind of mechanics and coaching as we go in. And then just to kind of wrap up, and then happy to chat more, share more, because I feel like I can always go in so many different directions. So really marketing, like I said, is one of those areas that's really primed for Agile. And we're seeing such an increase, especially with the pandemic. There were so many marketing teams who were all of a sudden like, hey, me. And I've worked with, and I know Austin's a big tech hub, but now I also work with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, banking, retail. Like at this point, it doesn't matter the market. There's just such a demand for it. But there's also this thought, and I'm sure development felt this way, and now marketing's feeling this way. Hey, wouldn't it be great if everybody else was agile? Wouldn't it be great if like we were all talking the same language and we all understood each other? And so marketing can be your partner within this. To what I was talking about, just even talking the same language. I've seen this question before, so I'll go ahead and I'm gonna stop sharing, kind of jump into it, and then we can jump into Q&A if there are any questions. Is there's often the discussion of, hey, the minute I mention Agile, it's like I'm put off, like by teams, marketing, or perhaps the non-technical teams, they automatically are like, oh, whatever. So I think that there's, from my perspective, they're starting off with just, can we talk about it from that value perspective? Can we talk about it from, I want to help prioritize. I want to give you what's in it for you. I want to give you more time. I want to help you so that you can get and focus on what's going to be the most impactful work that you can deliver. And so really starting off on that, what's in it for them. And then I feel like it's almost like you slowly lead towards Agile. You're like, oh yeah, well, let's talk about what Agile really means then. No, it's not about you have to run and you're going faster. It's about, can we deliver the right thing at the right time to the right people, delivering the most impact and value that we can. I'd love to hear from other folks. How do you feel like you get past that Agile is a bad word resistance?
Don't use the word Agile.
Yeah.
Just talk about the thing that you're talking about, not the label that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The irony is it's about how you market it, how you package it, how you sell it. Because, you know, if I said to you, hey, there's this kid and leaves his family and he goes on this thing and he's got friends, and you're like, okay, whatever. But if I said to you, it's called Star Wars and there's a bunch of lasers, and like you're like, oh my God, sign me up. Same story, just different way to package it, different way to look at it. I always use West Side Story and Romeo and Juliet, but I use Star Wars this time. So
Noah is also the king of analogies. So always so good. But yeah, to that point, when I think back to when Agile was introduced to me, it was introduced through like, there are these ceremonies you're going to do, and you're going to do Scrum. And it's not that I was resistant to it, but it wasn't until later that someone actually explained to me what was the value of all of those, of like all the ceremonies. And then I was like, well, why didn't someone give that to me earlier? Like, why wasn't that explained earlier? Because then I could know, again, more clearly, how can I address this? Are we actually taking the time to reflect and retrospect on our work? Are we actually building in like our goals? And so sometimes, because a lot of us are now living and breathing Agile, we do sometimes have a tendency to lead with like, well, but this is great, just do it like this, it's so much fun. But really getting back to that why behind it is really important.
there's a real quote that I use from a fake person. There was a show called Halt and Catch Fire, and the character Joe McMillan had this line that is amazing. In fact, I'm using it right now for something. Computers are not the thing. Computers are the thing that get you to the thing. And if you position Agile as, it's not the doing of the stand-up. It's not the doing of the retrospective. It's what does that get, to your point, Lani, what does that get you? How does that enrich your life? And if you talk about it in the enriching your life, then it becomes a completely different conversation.
Exactly. All right, so there's a question in Sherry. It said, how do you explain the value of the ceremonies? Yeah, so I usually start off just really simply, kind of one by one, in terms of thinking about like the sprint planning is really our time to decide what are we going to focus on which out of our list is the most high value and impactful work that we can do. And again, there's some elements to that one because it has to be like, I'm going to work on this impactful work, even if it doesn't, if it's an event that isn't going to see the light of day for like 3 more months, but that's still stuff I have to do now. When I think about stand up, it's really getting to those dependencies and those gaps. Where's that dedicated time where I can pull together my team because we're off diverging, working on our work, and we're coming together. Where's that time that we can actually talk and work as a team and identify those dependencies and gaps? Having the retrospective, I feel like that one's always great. There's 2 pieces to it for me. For retrospective, it's, hey, where can we take this time to actually pause and celebrate all the great work that we've done? And then where can we talk about what we can improve? And I can even go through pushback or refinement, which is how do we make sure that we're prepared for the work as we're moving forward? So that's usually how I guess simple I'll usually get to it when I'm talking to teams and to new folks who are doing like the new Scrum Master role or even the product owner role, or even we call them Agile lead because they may not have a Scrum Master. But really thinking about more what's the value that team's going to get, and what are they going to bring up. So yeah, make sure.
Yeah, it's a slightly different question. I think in software, I don't know if it's like the training and certification machine that's created this problem, but I see it quite frequently where, yeah, we've adopted language, we've adopted nomenclature, we've adopted ceremonies, but really we're the same traditional organization that just operates with this veneer, and therefore we don't get the results. Like, what do you think will, the same exact thing can't happen in marketing. Obviously your roles are completely different, the business is completely different, but how do you, prevent that from occurring, 10 years from now in Agile marketing?
I feel like that's a big question, Chase. But to first start off, yes, we totally see kind of like what might be termed the fake Agile, or, well, we're doing ceremonies, we're doing stuff. That's where it's always great to have like a coach or somebody who's coming in and checking in, especially kind of at the beginning and throughout, who can ask those questions of, hey, I heard you all talking about this. Is that like, how high value is that work to your goal? Are you really working on these elements? So we definitely see a lot of that. And I think that's where coaching helps, because you start questioning, is that really what you're working towards? Is this really helping you? And I think that even goes back to what I was saying before, where sometimes you take out the Agile and you take out even the name of the ceremony, you start talking about it in terms of what is the value that it's delivering. So in terms of kind of that long-term, and there's actually a lot more slides from the state of Agile marketing, and I did not give you all, I'm gonna share my screen again. I can give you all the link. But there's a lot of slides that talk about, there's one slide that even talks about what are some of the things that companies are using. So they're definitely using training, they're using, some are using coaching. We'll say that that's probably a growing area. There's a lot of internal, bringing in obviously other consultancy to help them build it out. But I would say for some of that long-term sustaining, I don't think that that's that much different than what you would do for any sort of change management and transformation in terms of from the development perspective. You need to really build up your internal advocacy, build up your internal centers of excellency, really have those people in place. And Sid, I know you talked about this recently. I have to go back and watch your, so Sid talked about a lot of that change management. It's very much the same. So we saw that going through. Come on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had a question regarding like your Agile marketing team makeup, right? Like I think one of the things that Agile professes itself is this sort of empowerment that the team has, like with traditional Agile, with the software development team that I work with. It's like they have a product owner that can ultimately make decisions, right? And you had shared earlier the challenges that you have is you have multiple stakeholders that you have to kind of answer to. In these agile marketing teams, is there some single point, or is there some centralized decision-making marketing matrix that is kind of made up to help you to be proficient and to act quickly? Is that something that of an idea that you've pursued, or is that something that you've talked about? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have seen kind of a couple combinations. Like I've personally been like a team lead. And so as a team lead, maybe I'm product marketing. So my job's already working with those stakeholders. And so I take on that role a little bit more in terms of prioritization and working with my team. There are some marketing organizations that do choose to have a product owner and Scrum Master role. And so they try to train those folks to have that prioritization. But obviously you have to then have enough funding in order to have those roles. So what I would say is usually a team lead for prioritization, someone who's interacting with stakeholders. Sometimes it can be just whoever ends up being the leader, especially in terms of a shared services organization. Their director may be that person who's really fielding those requests as they come in, ensuring that they're asking the right questions so that they can actually prioritize it well. Yeah, so all to say, no, there's not one kind of go-to role. It is more of a customization working with the organization to say, hey, what's going to work best for you all, plus obviously what kind of budget you have for all your roles.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so yeah, happy to always talk more. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And this is also the state of the Agile Marketing Report. Maybe I can grab it real quickly and throw it in the chat. And you all can check that out. It's got some other awesome insights. And like I said, ultimately, I think marketing is a great space to just start with if you want some partners in moving towards an agile transformation.